Hey Garth, how's it going?
Jason, I'm so good. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
It's good to be here, man. This is the most joyful time of every week for me. And as always, I'd like
Oh,
to
buddy.
open with a question, Garth. Why do you do this podcast?
Jason, why do I do this
Yeah, why do
podcast?
you do it? Why do you spend the time?
Okay, so as many of our listeners may know, I originally pitched this idea to you, and then you came back and said, "No, let's do like a bigger version of a podcast." I'm not like blowing sunshine here. I was really compelled by your leadership stance in your book, in the talk that you gave, the Art of Leadership Award for Case, like all of these things. I was like, how do I manipulate him into spending more time with me? No, I'm just joking. But what's an opportunity for me to do that? And this emerged, and so that was my original purpose. Then it's shifted. These are dedicated time to talk to someone who's deeply entrenched in their own exploration of what it means to be a good leader. That's why I do it. We get to have these conversations. It's dedicated time to the craft of leadership.
Cool. Um,
Why do you do
Today,
this podcast,
oh
Jason?
gosh, it was pretty. I do it because I like it. Because it brings me joy, and I like being creative, and I like talking to you, and I like talking about leadership, and I like meeting interesting people. There's at least five whys why I do this, Garth, and I think and that brings
Nice.
us to today's guest. Garth, do you want to tease today's guest for a minute before we get right into this absolutely compelling conversation?
Yeah, you saw her speak at NACE. She's written a book, Happier Hour, and it was on my wife's bedside table. We've both been through it. It's an amazing, dare I say, workbook for life. Like,
It is.
and she radiates joy and happiness. She has found her purpose. And folks, this is what it sounds like when you have a deep connection to your purpose.
This is not only an essential listen for leadership, this is an essential read. I think if I was someone who's coming into leadership, this would be one of the first, like, top five books I would give
Yeah.
to them. And I think it's so important for the day.
Yeah. And it's no coincidence that she has a program at UCLA, their business school. She is teaching the future leaders in business. And I couldn't be happier to hear that, Jason, that there's an incredible woman at the helm of their introduction into the business world. And it has to do with happiness and it has to do with paying attention to paying attention. I love it.
Yeah, she is a happiness superhero. I think we should get
Yeah.
right into this, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's
Enjoy, everybody. Enjoy.
enjoy the show.
Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to season 3 of Lassoing Leadership Beard's Book Club edition. This is where we are having authors on to talk about their incredible work and how it resonates with our approach to leadership, trying to lead in a kinder, more compassionate way. As always, well, sometimes now, I guess, Jason,
Yeah.
but as always, I like to say, joined by my mentor, my comrade in joy and leadership, Jason Rogers, great to see you once again.
Garth, I'm so excited about this podcast. This is just like the
I know.
hit parade of authors. I mean, starting with Zach Mercurio and David Yeager. We had Jennifer Wallace just
Kurt
recently.
Gray.
And oh my goodness. Oh, yes, of course. And so many more. But today's
Yeah. George
guest, I'm
Couros,
so excited. Yeah, so many. So
Drew,
many.
Drew Dudley.
It just keeps coming. And today, I'm so excited to have Cassie Holmes on the podcast. She wrote this incredible book called The Happier Hour. And Cassie, I don't want to waste any more time between Garth and I because we got to get right to you. We are so excited to have you here and to talk about this work, talk about your research, talk about your journey. Welcome to the show, Cassie. As always, Lassoing Leadership tradition. We have our guest introduce themselves so we don't miss anything or leave anything out. Cassie, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell our listeners who you are and a little bit about your background?
Well, thank you and hello. And I am so excited to be here with you guys today. I am Cassie Holmes. I am a professor at the business school at UCLA, Anderson School of Management. I teach MBAs, and I've been researching on the topic that is so important to me, and hopefully to you guys, because it's relevant to you all, is happiness, and in particular, the role of time, how we should be thinking about and spending our time. And I've been researching this throughout my career. And I've been teaching this course, Applying the Science of Happiness to Life Design, to my MBAs, my executive MBAs, and speaking to like different broader audiences. Like that's where I met you initially, Jason. And that is what brings me joy. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about the science of happiness. And also
Oh my
our
gosh.
experience of time.
And if you are watching this, Cassie, your smile is electric. It's amazing.
Yes.
Well, I am
radiating happiness. Now, Cassie, as you start your book, and everybody should read this book. Like everybody should read this book because it has so much good research. But it's got like problems and solutions in it. And it's got tons of personal stories, which I truly loved about the book, Cassie. And you start the book by telling about your journey to becoming a professor who's looking into happiness, and it all happened, on a train or somewhere along those lines. Yeah. It's a pretty sticky story. Can you kind of give our listeners a high level, what brought you to this work on the West Coast?
Yeah, what brought me to this work is the fact that for my happiness, I felt like time was the biggest problem. It was my big barrier to happiness. And the story that I share in the opening of my book that really propelled me into this research, which is sort of me search, right? It's like, what can I inform of how I should be thinking about and living my life? But this was earlier in my career. So before I was at UCLA, I was on the faculty at Wharton, so living in Philly. And I was invited to give this talk up in New York that I couldn't say no to. And this was just like a crazy, hectic day. I took the train up early morning, back-to-back meetings, into this super pressure-filled talk, into more meetings, and then into this dinner. And I looked at my watch and freaked out. And I jump in a cab, yelling at this guy who is already speeding to hurry up, because I could not miss the very last train that would get me home to my 4-month-old and my husband asleep in Philly. And I did make the train that night, barely, but it was just like sinking. And when I talk about it, it was 13 years ago, but it literally still feels like yesterday. Just that feeling of just complete overwhelm. And as I was watching the night lights whiz by, I'm like, I don't know if I can keep up between the pressures of work, wanting to be a good parent, wanting to be a good friend, the never-ending pile of chores, too few hours in the day to get it all done. And I wanted more time. And I think it's really important is that I wanted more time, not just so that I could get more done. I wanted more time so that I could actually slow down and experience the time that I was spending, so that I wouldn't wake up in years from now looking back and it was all just a blur of that rushing through. And what really I was experiencing, which I've been researching, is that experience of time poverty, of that feeling of having too much to do and not enough time to do it. And we can talk about that, the effects, the prevalence, but it was really this sort of on the train, I was like, something's got to give. And I had this notion that what's got to give is I need to quit my job and move to an island somewhere, retire early. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of here, with this idea, if only I had more time, then I'd be happier. But I did not quit my job. Instead, I've sort of studied, well, what is the relationship between how much time people have and their happiness? And we can take any thread of this if you guys want to pick up and talk more. But what we've actually found in our research is that, yes, having too little time is bad, but also so is having too much time, from a lacking sense of productivity and purpose. So when we are feeling really time poor, the answer is not to quit everything. The answer is instead to figure out, okay, and actually there's a lot of too little time, less than 2 hours in the day, too much time, more than about 5 hours in the day, bad. But in between, there's like, it's really about not how much time we have, it's how we spend the time that we have. And that has propelled my research since of how should we be thinking about, how should we be spending our time so that we feel greater joy, so that we feel more satisfied, so that we don't have that burnout. And that is what my work speaks to, and now what I've learned in my work, my research, the answers, that then relaying that to my students and to readers.
Amazing. Like the concept of time and your like time poverty and then too much time. You also mentioned purpose in there.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about time as the solution and not the challenge, and maybe break down what you mean by that and how it fundamentally shifts the way maybe your MBA students, your business students approach their lives. And if you want to work in, because this is something that's come up a couple of times here, Cassie,
Yeah.
is it balance? Is that the word is that what we're trying to seek here? But I'd love for you to talk about those pieces.
Yeah, those are all so good. I'm like, oh my God, we could have
Good.
like 5
I know.
podcasts on each of those little points
Maybe
within
we
our
might.
answer.
Maybe we might.
Okay, so let's see. What
How is time the solution, not the challenge?
time is the solution and not the challenge, because it feels like a challenge because that's our sense of limitation and constraint. Like we don't feel like we have the hours in the day to get everything done. But it's the solution because how we think and dedicate our hours in the day have a tremendous impact on how we feel during our days and how satisfied we feel about our lives. And what's really interesting is that this doesn't, like, we can choose to feel happier, and it doesn't require any drastic life altering changes. Like, it is not the answer to like leave your job and live on the beach. What it is, the answer is how can we be more intentional with what we spend our time on? How can we pay attention during the time that we're spending such that that time that we're spending has the impact that is like, it's not just what we're moving through. It's not a resource that you're like investing towards a different outcome. How we spend the hours of our days sum up to our lives. So it literally is the content of our lives. And so when we think about, like, to your question of balance, I actually don't like thinking of it as balance, because then it assumes a trade-off between sort of work and leisure, of what's mine versus for you. It is not a balance or trade-off. In fact, it's like, okay, thinking about what are those ways of spending that are truly fueling in some way, whether it's making you feel really connected to the people that you love, those in your household, those of your friendships, making you feel really connected to maybe your broader community. For you guys, like your school community, not just the students, but the parents. For me, it's like my students, and then even the broader community, you know, like that sense of belonging and connection. But then also purpose is like, what are those ways of spending that are in line with what matters to you, your own goals. And purpose is one of these terms that is so important because it is the sort of why that drives for, you know, you guys as school leaders. It's really important from your organizational standpoint to have a sense of purpose, but also for us as individuals to feel like what really drives us, both in the work we do, but in how we engage in our lives more generally. And it can sound really lofty. And so I shared Jason within the talk with him, but also in the book, is the 5 whys exercise as a way to sort of, this idea of purpose sounds like intractable, but actually making it feel more tractable by asking yourself, like, okay, what is it that you do for work? And then why? Why do you do that? But not ending at that first answer of like, because usually it's like, well, to pay the bills or the job description. But actually for that answer being like, well, why is this the work to do that's important? And then 5 layers down, it really reveals for you individually what drives you. And through that, I sort of it's been totally game changing when I did the 5 whys exercise, because I'm like, yes, I'm a business school professor, what is that? It's research, teaching. I have administrative service. But then like, well, why is that important? It's about creating and disseminating knowledge, and then sort of digging down. It's like, why led me to really identify for myself that what my purpose is to create knowledge about what makes people happy, disseminate knowledge about what makes people happy, and cultivate happiness in my community. For me, that is so motivating. And it's really helpful because it like guides how I spend my time. So for like a research project, if it is like a student approaches me and they're like, all right, Professor Holmes, I have an idea. And if I think it could help create knowledge about what makes people happy, then I'm like, sure, I will advise it. If not, I'll be like, maybe there's another faculty who might be a better fit. It also helps you say like no, which is really important because our time is so limited. But also it helps sort of make the unfun parts of our job more fun or feel better because you're like meetings, do not love them. But if it's like a meeting with a research collaborator, then I'm like, actually, this is about creating knowledge about what makes people happy. If it's a meeting with my colleagues, I'm like, well, really, this is about how do I instill sort of happiness within my community. So it helps guide our time as well as make the time that we're spending better. And it's really helpful to know what drives you. And in most cases, it somehow aligns with the organization. But it is so important. So yeah, I'm like, again, I can talk about like so many things.
It was such an amazing answer. Intention, pay attention to how we spend time. I think that's really important. Your graduate student, MBA students are so lucky to go into a leadership course, which is telling them to pay attention to how they feel and that intentionality for high impact too. And when I read your book, I was like, I love the 5 whys. I've actually been using it in this course I offer called Cohort 21. It's professional development for educators, and we use the 5 whys.
Oh, good.
And by the time you get to the 5th why, you're like deep.
Totally.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's deep. So really appreciate that.
What's your 5th why?
Well, we use it for we use it for an action project. So so this is for educators in Ontario independent schools, and they're pursuing an action sort of research project. We call it the action plan. And we want them to ground their action plan into like who they are as an educator, which builds in curriculum, which builds in pedagogy and all these things. But Cassie, we've been doing that for 15 years. And this year we launched a side note to it, which is called the Leadership Lab. And what you were able to do with your 5 whys, that's what we're really focused on in the Leadership Lab. They come up with a leadership purpose statement, like, why are you doing these things? So we are aligned, Cassie.
I love
Beautiful.
It. I will say you didn't answer what your 5 whys.
No, I'm tucking that away. I'm asking him in the entry to this podcast. That's my opening now.
Okay, well, we'll save it for then. Save it for then.
Great.
Cassie, when I saw you speak in Seattle this year, I was sitting beside a colleague, and it was like maybe 15 minutes into your talk, and we're both tearing up. And it was around time and joy. And it was like, oh my gosh, something is happening here. And you were talking about something might seem really kind of boring or tactile, like on the surface. And you were talking about time auditing, and you were talking about appreciating the big moments, and also talking about how few of those moments are available. And you were talking about our children, or I think you're talking about how many summer holidays you have left, or those sorts of things, to bring awareness and to bring appreciation for time in a different way. So take it however you want, from the micro time audit side or to the macro time, how limited it is. And how does that impact our view of happiness and joy and purpose and fulfillment? I love when you talk about that stuff.
Yeah. So the intention is sort of like what I was talking about before, of selecting activities that make you feel connected, that make you feel productive, align with your purpose. But then there's like also the paying attention is like, even if, like you do set aside time for these activities that are connecting, for instance, often we're distracted during them, right? And so there's actually research shows that it like would ping people during their days and ask like, what are you thinking about right now? What are you doing and how do you feel? And it showed that we are not thinking about what we're doing. Our minds are wandering 47% of the time. So almost half of the times their mind are somewhere else, yet people are happier when they're more engaged. And given that we have so little time in our days to spend on these like really wonderful things, like the example that I will share with you and that I shared in the talk is my weekly coffee date with my daughter, Alita.
Yes. Yeah, this was the one. And we're just like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
no. It's a coffee date. Here it comes.
And this was born out of a very functional routine that is like on Thursday mornings of driving her to preschool and me to my office. I wanted caffeine, obviously, right? So we'd stop at the local coffee shop to get me caffeinated. But what was this mindless routine? We turned into this like really treasured ritual where it's like each week a half hour, just the two of us. I have my flat white, she has her hot chocolate, and we're just together chatting. And yeah, it's something that happens every week. And there's this perception that just because something that is happening every day, we assume that it will continue to happen every day. And also because of hedonic adaptation, which is our tendency to get used to things over time, such that when you do the same thing again and again, it stops having as intense of an emotional impact. And it's good that we hedonically adapt to bad stuff because it makes us resilient. But the fact that we also get used to and stop noticing the good stuff, like the joys that are there in our life, means that we're sort of missing out on potential joy. And so like a weekly sort of caffeination, mission for me, is like, I just assume that, of course, she'll continue on this with me every week, but that's not true, right? So she's now 10. This started when she was 4. We've gone on weekly coffee dates. And then I have a 13-year-old son, which has revealed to me that in just a couple years, she's going to prefer going to the coffee shop with her friends instead of me. So it's not going to be every week. Maybe it's like every month. And then she's going to go off to college. And then she's going to move to New York if it's anything like me. And doing this sort of like estimating and calculating, I realized Lita and I have about 36% of our coffee dates together left in our entire lives. And she's only 10. And what that does is initially it's like the tears, right, Jason? Like you're
Big
like,
Big time.
I thought she was a happiness professor. Why am I crying right now? But recognizing the limited nature of these times is so powerful because it motivates us to make the time. No matter how busy I am in a week, absolutely, I carve out that 30 minutes with my daughter. And it used to happen on Thursday mornings, but now she's in elementary school. So it's now too early to happen on Thursday morning. So it's on the weekend. But that's fine because we still spend the time. But it's not just motivating me to make the time. It also affects how I engage during those times. Like I make sure my phone is away. And actually the bigger distractor for me is I'm always in my head, like thinking about planning what's next. But I don't want to be thinking about what's next when this is the time that matters. And it's only 30 minutes, but those 30 minutes and the resulting relationship I have with my daughter absolutely colors my satisfaction with my life overall. And so what's a really important thing to keep in mind in every which way when we're thinking about time and happiness is that it's not about quantity. It's not about how much time you have available. And there is such thing as too much, as I said. It's also not about the quantity of how much time you spend on any given activity that determines the outcome. It's absolutely about the quality of the time. How, when you are spending your time on those really meaningful activities, is making them count. That what happiness is in the academic literature, it's like subjective well-being. But that is picking up on how we feel in our lives, like how we feel enjoyment and joy during our days. But it's also the satisfaction we feel about our lives. So this evaluation of when I'm asking you, Jason, like, how happy are you? You're doing this evaluation. It's like, yes, there are the points in your day that then sort of color your answer to that question. And you want to make sure that those points in your day are the ones that are those sources of connection, that are the ones that are in line with your purpose. That there's a lot of other stuff that fills our days, and that's fine. We have to do this stuff, right? But is making the times that matter really count in that life evaluation and in our experience.
Cassie, amazing. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested in, these aspiring leaders that you're talking to. And over the course of our, however many episodes, Jason, 130, 140 episodes we've got a lot of advice. And one of the pieces of advice that really sat with me was from a colleague of mine. She's deputy head of school at Holy Trinity. Tracy Fosher is her name. And she said, we'd asked her for a piece of advice. And she said, my piece of advice is, if a meeting gets canceled, don't fill it with work. Stand up, walk around the school. And I follow that advice whenever I can. Jason has, slow walking in his schedule. I do that as well. But in your book, in your research, you ask people to finish the sentence, I don't have time to. And as leaders who are listening to this podcast, no doubt we do not have time to do a lot of things. We have packed timetables, schedules, all those things. But their answers were really revealing. What did you learn from that exercise of asking that question, and what patterns kept showing up?
Yeah, what's interesting is that the things that what it reveals is what people want to be spending their time on that they aren't already. And also, I will say in many of those cases, that answer is very revealing to oneself and is actually like, and, there's other parts of the book where I, lead you in the time audit, Jason referred to, where people track their time, how they're spending their time, how they feel from it. And that is actually quite illuminating that we have, I was going to say most people, but I will actually say all people have more time available than they think if they sort of pull away time from some of these things that we think demand our time, but don't necessarily. That all to say is, when you ask even yourself, like, what's something I don't have time to do that I wish I did? Then my answer is like, whatever your answer is, in the next coming week or two, make time for that. And they will actually realize, oh, I can make the time. Like, instead of, so like, we all get exhausted. And so like, there's this, and I see it in the time audits of my students, as well as like hearing from readers, that at the end of the day, we're like, oh, we're just so tired. So it's like, you like go home and turn the TV on with this sort of sense that will be your rejuvenation and relaxation. And like, but then it's like, you add up those like 3 hours every night, and that's like 15 hours in the work week. That like, what if instead of turning on the TV, because like, so someone's like, I don't have time to see my friends. Well, what if instead of that TV time after dinner with the family, you actually suggest meeting up with a friend for a drink? And it's like, a lot of people are like, wait, I don't have the time. Like, that's so late. I'm like, well, not really. It's like 8:30. You will still be home by 10. But that fueling, like the feeling coming home from that, meeting up with your friend, it's like, oh my God, it's energizing and makes you feel like you have so much time. Similarly, I don't have time to exercise. If you actually make time to exercise, then it like fuels you. It makes you feel like, oh my God, actually like bring on the day, dude. Like I can do anything, because when you've invested in that thing that gives you the energy. Reading for pleasure is one that comes up often, but actually like a bundling strategy is like, if on your commutes you like turn on the audiobook, then you are reading, like a book a week for pleasure. So I'll just say that it's really revealing what people say they don't have time for, because they wish that they had time for it. And then my sort of answer is like, just give it a go, put it in your schedule, make the time. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I do have time for these things that matter, but it's up to us to do it. We don't want to be reactive and like just the stuff coming in that determines what fills our time. We really want to be proactive on like, what are those things that matter? What do we wish we had time for? Spend a little time on it. Again, it's quality, not quantity. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it. I'm not saying like every night go out to dinner with a different person, or, it's like, whatever, like you have to start training for a marathon if you want to exercise. I'm saying a little bit actually can go a long way.
Cassie, what I love doing is I love talking to authors and hanging out with Garth. And this is like making time for joy. And I want to just really take a moment and appreciate you and thank you for all of your work. I really hope that our listeners are as compelled as I am and as Garth are to pick up your book and follow you and stay in touch and learn how to be better leaders, live happier lives. And you've done some really incredible work. You touched a lot of lives. So we're so thankful that you take the time to join us. Before we go, though, we always like to highlight your work. If people are looking for you, Cassie, they want more Cassie in their lives, they want more happiness, where should they find you if they can't go to UCLA? By the way, I'm applying for your executive MBA scholarship.
Well, yeah, my book, Happier Hour, How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time, and Focus on What Matters Most, has a lot of the lessons. And for those who don't feel like they have the time, there is the audio version. Jason was saying.
It's outstanding, by the way. You read it. It's so good. Yeah.
And I narrate it. So it'll feel like we're hanging out for hours. It's great. And then I, from my own time audit, realized I don't enjoy time on social media. So I'm not really on social media. You can find me on LinkedIn, Cassie Holmes. But just through my website, CassieMHolmes.com, you'll see the research that I'm working on and sort of how to find my book and how to find me. But it's so fun to talk with you both.
Yeah,
and I love this.
Cassie, last question on the way out. Is Ted Lasso a great leader?
Yes, because he is driven by his authenticity and his search, and sort of not even search for, but view of positivity through his experiences. So I say yes.
It's not about the wins and losses. It's about getting these young men to be the best version of themselves. Cassie, thank you so much. Can you wrap us up with our tagline?
Yes. Keep leading and reading the Ted Lasso way.
Well done, Cassie.
All right. Thank you so much. I am happier for having had this time with you.
Great. So fun.
Hey, I love a good outro. Here we go. That was an inspiring conversation.
She called you out, though, didn't she? She asked you about your 5 whys, and then you didn't answer, and I was on you. Like, I was like, you know what this guy's doing? He's not answering the question. And then she called you out and said, you didn't answer the question. We didn't have time to cover it in that conversation, so I'm coming back to it, Garth. What's your why? What's your 5th why of school leadership? I'm dying to know.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for holding me to account for that. Appreciate it. I'm a values-based leader. I did an incredible program at Royal Roads. We talked about it at length in season 1. I brought my professor onto the podcast not once, but twice in season 1. So at that program, we had to come up with a leadership purpose statement. And mine is to, ready for this, revolutionize education, together, for the common good. And that's a value-laden statement. So each word has like 3 or 4 values that are in it. And so I'm constantly thinking about that every time I wake up, every time I walk through the doors. And did I accomplish that at the end of every day? Sometimes it's very intentional. Sometimes it's just in the back of my mind. But for me, getting to your whys, you spoke about these 5 whys. For me, the pathway to that is values. And if you can have a purpose and articulation of your values, then you can have things resonate out from there. So that's my long-winded answer saying that's my 5 whys.
Well, I'm glad we stuck around now. So that's a mic drop moment, Garth Nichols. So thank you for sharing that with our listeners, and can't wait for the next one, buddy.
Thanks, folks.
Take care.